In 1971, Pete Duel was a television star with a smile that captivated America. His role as Hannibal Heyes in Alias Smith and Jones, propelling him to the peak of fame. Audiences adored him. The press praised him. But just months later, in a dark Hollywood apartment, Pete was found dead, a bullet in his head, the TV still playing an episode of his own show. What happened? A mysterious apology letter? A clash with someone powerful? Or just an inner pain no one saw? Pete had it all. Looks, talent, fame. But inside, he battled alcohol, loneliness, and Hollywood's pressures. His story is a paradox. A man loved by the world, yet unable to love himself. Let's explore the tragedy of Pete Duel, where glamour and darkness intertwined to find answers to an unsolved mystery. Chapter 1. The Penfield Boy, a dream leading to tragedy. In the snow-covered town of Penfield in 1940, a boy named Peter Elstrom Duel, or Pete, stood quietly by a window, his gaze piercing through falling snowflakes. They say as a child, he wrote in a notebook, "I'm a star fallen from the sky." Those words, like a prophecy, haunted those left behind when Pete, the man with a radiant smile, fell into Hollywood's shadows. Pete grew up in a cozy wooden house, filled with the scent of his mother Lillian's cookies and the laughter of his father, a stern doctor, echoing from the living room. But Pete was different from other kids. He'd sit alone, clutching a book, his big brown eyes holding a whole world. At Penfield High, he found joy on the school stage. A teacher, standing still after one performance, said, "That boy has a special light, like he was born to stand before a crowd." But his family had other expectations. His father wanted Pete to follow in his footsteps as a doctor, carrying on the tradition. Weekend dinners grew heavy when his father asked about the future, while Pete, gripping his spoon, dreamed of Hollywood's lights. Once, after a heated argument with his father, Pete vanished for a day. They found him sitting in a field behind town, scribbling in a small notebook. No one knew what he wrote. That notebook never surfaced again. Was something already amiss in Pete's sensitive soul? At 18, Pete left Penfield for an acting academy in New York, carrying a heart like an unexposed film, unsure if it would reveal smiles or tears. There, he honed his craft, inching toward his dream. But Pete kept writing poetry, a way to confess feelings he couldn't voice. A dorm mate said that at 16, Pete wrote a poem about a fallen star. No one kept the original, but some swore it was pinned to a dorm bulletin board, until it was mysteriously torn down, as if someone didn't want it to exist. On New York nights, Pete sat by his window, watching city lights flicker, wondering if he could conquer Hollywood. He often told friends of his fear of burning too fast, as if sensing his fate. Close ones, said Pete, always carried an unease, like he knew the fame he chased might consume him. His journey began with hope, but did those poems foreshadow his tragedy? Did Pete's big dream plant the seeds for his downfall? Or was it just the start of a faded path? Chapter 2. Television Star, A Cage of Fame. Back in 1965, Pete Duel hit Hollywood like a fresh breeze, smooth, dazzling, and moving so fast he didn't see the cliff opening up beneath him. He showed up with an old suitcase from Penfield, those brown eyes of his lighting up as he stood before smoky studios where the crew's laughter mingled with the hum of cameras. Hollywood rolled out the red carpet, but was it also setting an invisible trap? Pete started small, taking bit parts in Gomer Pyle, USMC, standing quietly behind the spotlight, learning to blend into this glitzy world. Then came Dave Willis in the sitcom Love on a Rooftop, like a bolt of lightning. With just a half smile and a playful glance, Pete made audiences feel like they were watching themselves, a dreamer in turbulent times. The papers called him the new star, and fan letters started piling up in his room. The big break came in 1971 when Pete stepped into the boots of Hannibal Heyes in Alias Smith and Jones. That Western, inspired by Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, became a TV sensation. Pete, in his cowboy hat, strode across the set like he owned the world. Folks say viewers across America were glued to their screens, hooked on the tale of the charming outlaw. Big contracts from ABC rolled in, and people compared him to Paul Newman. But in a rare, quiet moment, he confided to a friend, "I want to do something that matters, not just play a cowboy on TV." Even with his professionalism, Pete would go silent between takes, staring past the fake fields like he was searching for a way out. Once, he told his co-star Ben Murphy he'd seen a strange man standing outside the set for 3 days straight, watching him from a distance. Nobody knew who the guy was. Then he vanished, like he'd never been there. Was it just Pete's imagination? Or was someone keeping tabs on him? By late 1971, Pete started carrying a small notebook. Every night after leaving the set, he'd sit in his apartment, scribbling under a dim lamp. Some say the first few pages had just one line, "I'm being watched." Nobody ever read that notebook, and it disappeared after his death. Was Pete jotting down his fears, or just the tangled thoughts of a man losing faith? There's a chilling story that went around. A fan claimed, nobody knows if it's true, that Pete got a letter saying, "You're flying high like the wind, but watch out you don't fall." That note, like a prophecy, haunted anyone who heard about it. Pete still showed up at Hollywood bars, whiskey in hand, but his eyes carried a new unease. He was at the top of his game, but was something, or someone, waiting for him to stumble? Was fame's bright glow a cage he couldn't escape, or was someone quietly pushing him into the shadows? Chapter 3. Bright studio lights, pain no one saw. Hollywood in the 1970s was a relentless machine, and Pete Duel, bright star that he was, felt it grinding him down. Days on the Alias, Smith and Jones set, stretched from sunrise to midnight, the buzz of cameras and cigarette smoke clinging to him like a curse. Pete was exhausted, not just from the schedule, but from playing Hannibal Heyes. He once told a friend, "I don't want to be just a cowboy on TV." But Hollywood didn't care. They just wanted his smile for the cameras. The press got harsher. Word is, after Pete turned down a long interview, one article called him aloof, cutting into his pride like a sharp blade. A crew member recalls Pete crying in the dressing room, whispering, "They want me to be a puppet." Sometimes, mid-scene, he'd stand up and walk off, saying only, "The air in here's too thick." Was he just tired? Or was something on that set making him uneasy? At Hollywood bars, Pete would sit in a corner, old soul music playing, swirling his whiskey like he was trying to hold on to a piece of himself that hadn't broken. People noticed he was drinking more, like it was his way of quieting the voices in his head. Friends saw him withdrawing, but they figured it was just a phase. One friend said Pete once picked up the phone at midnight, stayed silent for a long time, then said, "I told you not to call me anymore." After that call, he barely spoke to anyone for a week. Who was on the line? A producer, a friend, or just a voice in his mind? Some nights, Pete would stare at the hotel room phone like he was waiting for a call or dreading one. He didn't open up, but his eyes held a vague fear, like someone was watching from afar. Hollywood back then was full of stories about stars being manipulated, tied up by invisible contracts. Was Pete carrying a secret he couldn't share? A colleague said he'd often look out the studio window, like he was searching for a figure in the crowd. Pete kept smiling for the cameras, but inside he was crumbling. He told a friend, "It's all just fake." Those words rang like a warning. Was he talking about Hollywood, himself, or something darker? In those lonely nights, with the whiskey glass empty, Pete must have wondered, how do I get out of this gilded cage? Was Hollywood's pressure the only thing pushing him into the dark, or was a deeper secret haunting him? Chapter 4. Broken Love, Betrayed Trust. Pete Duel loved deeply, but it was never safe. Every time he gave his heart, it seemed someone found a way to crush it quietly. In Hollywood's dazzling world, where smiles hid daggers, Pete longed for real love. But his heart, sensitive as that Penfield Boy, collected only scars and mysteries that make you wonder. Was he betrayed by the very people he trusted most? Pete never married, keeping his personal life locked tight like a closed book. Word is, in the late 1960s, he fell for an unknown actress on a small set. They met amid film reels and lights, where Pete flashed a genuine smile. But that love fell apart fast. Hollywood's pressure and his sensitive nature broke it to pieces. A close friend said Pete once quietly admitted, "She warned me, but I thought she was just jealous." Nobody knows who she was or what her warning meant. Was it just pain talking or a clue to something bigger? Hollywood didn't just break careers, it knew how to break hearts. For Pete, love didn't just fade, it left him feeling used, led on. It was like someone staged a play, and he was the only one who didn't know he was acting. A chilling rumor went around. In Pete's small apartment, they found an unaddressed envelope. Inside were scribbled lines full of regret. A friend said the letter mentioned a mistake tied to someone powerful, but that letter was never sent and later vanished from the scene. Was it Pete's confession or a secret someone wanted buried? Pete still sought comfort at Hollywood parties, but he was a lost figure. He'd stand in a corner, out of the spotlight, holding a watered-down drink, his eyes cutting through the painted faces, like he was looking for someone who wasn't there anymore. Friends tried to pull him into the fun, but they didn't see the pain he hid behind his smile. A colleague said Pete grew quieter, like every time he opened up, he feared getting hurt again. Those emotional scars seemed to pile up, making Pete withdraw more. He told a friend, "Love's a dangerous game here." Those words sounded like a warning. Was he just talking about failed romances? Or was a bigger force, lurking in Hollywood's shadows, making him feel betrayed? In those lonely nights, when the party lights dimmed, Pete must have wondered, who can I trust in this town? Did those heartaches push him to despair? Or was someone in Hollywood's darkness making him feel betrayed? Chapter 5. Shattered Mirror, a self fading away. He used to smile at the mirror. Now, Pete Duel looked into it and saw a man dissolving, bit by bit. In his small Hollywood apartment, amid empty bottles and half-smoked cigarettes, Pete wasn't Hannibal Heyes, the star millions adored. He was a man wrestling with himself, trapped in the shadow of the role that made him famous. Pete once told his co-star Ben Murphy, "I feel stuck in a pointless loop." He yearned to be seen as a real actor, not just the TV cowboy Hollywood wanted. After takes, Ben said Pete would stare at the studio lights, like he was gazing at something lost. Was he chasing an old dream, or a way out of the pressure crushing him? On sleepless nights, Pete sat still in the dark, the living room lamp off, the soft clink of his whiskey glass hitting the table each time he let it go. Booze wasn't a friend anymore. It was how he hushed the whispers in his mind. Some say he blamed himself for not having the guts to quit Alias Smith and Jones, for not chasing a bigger dream. "I'm scared of being a failure," he told a friend, his voice trembling like a confession. A chilling detail. Days before his death, Pete argued on the phone. His voice carried through the walls. "You can't force me." Then silence for nearly an hour. Nobody knows who he was talking to. That call, it was never traced. Was it a producer, a friend, or a bigger force weighing on him? Those words, like an omen, would echo in his final days. Pete grew more withdrawn, like every word or glance could wound him further. He'd stand silent on set, looking past the fake fields, like he wanted to run. But run where? Hollywood was a merciless machine, and Pete seemed to realize he couldn't win. Was he punishing himself for his choices, or was someone behind the lights making him feel there was no way out? Chapter 6. New Year's Eve. A gunshot and a secret. On the night of December 30th, 1971, Pete Duel sat in his Hollywood apartment, the TV blaring a basketball game, an empty wine bottle rolling on the table. His girlfriend, Diane Ray, was there, but the air felt heavy, like something was coming. Pete watched an episode of Alias Smith and Jones, then suddenly said, "I don't recognize myself anymore." He got up, walked to the bedroom, and grabbed a .38 caliber revolver. A shot rang out, or didn't, because Diane swears she heard nothing. When she reached the living room, Pete was still. Blood pooled under the TV's flickering blue light, where his voice laughed on screen, like nothing had happened. His death was ruled a suicide, with blood alcohol levels twice the legal limit, but shadows hang over the story. A note was rumored to be found. "I'm sorry, I can't go on." But it was never officially released. Nobody knows who saw it first. The police wouldn't comment, and Diane never mentioned it. Was that note real, or just a rumor to hide a bigger truth? The night before, Pete told a neighbor, "I'm tired of it all." But what drove him to that edge? A bold theory spread. Pete was planning to leave Alias Smith and Jones and maybe reveal something about the show's underbelly. A crew member said, "He knew more than we thought." Was it just talk, or was Pete a threat to a bigger force in Hollywood? That old pattern returned, like a fated loop. The last time anyone heard Pete, he snapped into the phone. "You can't force me." Just like he'd shouted days earlier. This time, nobody answered back. Who was on the other end? A producer? A stranger? Or just a voice in his head? Some say Pete, drunk, pulled the trigger by accident. Others whisper that 1970s Hollywood didn't take kindly to those who broke the rules. Why didn't Diane hear the shot? Was the TV too loud? Or was something covered up? The scene that night haunts. The TV's flickering light, a broken glass on the floor, and Pete's voice on screen, like a ghost from the past. Was Pete a victim of himself, or something bigger? Did he end his own life? Or did someone choose that moment for him in a way he never wanted? Epilogue, an unfinished legacy, lingering mystery. Pete Duel's death on New Year's Eve, 1971, shook Hollywood. Alias Smith and Jones limped on with Roger Davis, but the magic was gone. The show was canceled after its third season, and Pete's name became a symbol of talent cut short. Over 50 years later, fans still watch his episodes on YouTube, whispering, "Every time I see Hannibal Heyes, I feel like Pete's trying to say something." Millions loved him, but in the mirror, he saw only a fading shadow. In a Hollywood that valued ratings over mental health, Pete wasn't just an actor, he was a replaceable cog. When he started to veer off track, they didn't know how to save him, only how to replace him. His story is a warning. Fame's glow can drown out cries for help. In the 1970s, when depression was seen as weakness, Pete found no support. He stood for sensitive artists, caught between public expectations and inner pain. But the mystery of Pete's death lingers. Did he die from depression, or because he threatened something bigger? Was the "I'm sorry" note real, or just a rumor? Why didn't Diane hear the shot? And that phone call, who was it with? Some whisper Pete was silenced for wanting to leave the show, for knowing too much. Others say he was just a man who couldn't outrun his inner storms. Where's the truth? Picture Pete in his final days. Alone, the TV's glow on his face, whiskey in hand, like he was drinking himself away. And somewhere on that screen, Hannibal Heyes laughs, a ghost that won't leave. Pete Duel's story isn't over. It lives in the flickering light of old TVs, in unanswered questions, and in whispers that someone made him go quiet. What do you think? Share your thoughts in the comments.